It all began in a small town where I was just another middle school kid, trying to blend in. There was this one kid, let's call him Jake, who made my life miserable. In home economics class, he would torment me daily, using his sewing needle to bother me. I was just a shy kid with glasses, struggling to get through each day. When my mom remarried and we moved to Riverside, I thought I had left all that behind. High school was a new start for me. I began to gain confidence and received attention from guys, which was both exciting and overwhelming. Then, out of nowhere, Jake resurfaced. He sent me a message on social media, complimenting my appearance and asking to meet up. The same person who had tormented me now wanted to be friendly? I declined his invitation immediately, but he didn't take no for an answer. Day after day, messages kept coming. Sometimes I ignored them, other times I replied with sarcasm. But nothing stopped him. It felt like he was obsessed, and it started to wear me down. I began dreading checking my phone, always worried about another message from Jake. I tried to push everything out of my mind and focus on my new life in Riverside. But then my sister came home with chilling news. A girl from her class had been attacked and molested by people she thought were her friends. As she listed the names of those involved, one stood out: Jake. The realization hit me hard. While Jake had been sending me those messages and acting all friendly, he had been involved in something horrific. It made me question everything. Had I been his next target? Was I just lucky to have moved away? I couldn't sleep that night, my mind racing with what-ifs. Every creak in the house made me jump. I kept thinking I saw shadows moving outside my window. The safety I'd felt in Riverside suddenly felt very fragile. The next day I went to the police station. My hands were shaking as I showed them the messages from Jake. The officer's face grew grim as he scrolled through them. He asked me questions about Jake, about our history, about any hints he might have dropped in his messages. I felt sick as I recounted everything. As days turned into weeks, more details emerged about the attack. It wasn't an isolated incident. There had been others, stretching back months, girls who had been too scared or ashamed to come forward. I couldn't help but wonder how many more were out there, suffering in silence. The investigation dragged on, and I found myself looking over my shoulder constantly. Every unfamiliar face on the street became a potential threat. I started taking self-defense classes, desperate for some sense of control. My mom noticed the change in me, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her everything. How do you explain that kind of fear to someone who hasn't lived it? Then, one rainy afternoon, I got a call from the police. They'd made arrests. Jake and his friends were in custody. I should have felt relief, but instead, I felt numb. The officer's words washed over me as he explained the next steps: statements, possible trial appearances, victim support services. As I hung up the phone, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I barely recognized the person staring back at me. She looked older, harder, with eyes that had seen too much. I realized then that this wasn't over. The arrests were just the beginning. The following months were a blur of legal proceedings and therapy sessions. I learned more about Jake and his friends, about the twisted game they'd been playing with girls' lives. Each new revelation felt like another blow, another reminder of how close I'd come to being one of their victims. Sometimes, late at night, I still find myself scrolling through those old messages from Jake. I analyze every word, looking for clues I might have missed. Was there something I could have done differently? Could I have prevented what happened to those other girls? I know it's not my fault. The therapist reminds me of that in every session. But knowing something and feeling it are two different things. The guilt still gnaws at me, a constant companion I can't seem to shake. As the trial date approaches, I'm filled with a mix of dread and determination. The thought of facing Jake in court makes my stomach churn, but I know I have to do it. Not just for myself, but for all the other girls whose lives he's affected. I'm not the same person I was when this all started. That naive girl is gone, replaced by someone stronger, more cautious, but also more aware of the darkness that can hide behind a familiar face. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this: I won't let fear control my life anymore. Jake and his friends took enough from me and others. They don't get to take anything else. As I prepare for what's to come, I can't help but think about that girl I used to be, dodging sewing needles in home economics class. I wish I could go back and tell her that she's stronger than she knows, that she'll survive this and come out the other side. But since I can't do that, I'll do the next best thing. I'll be strong for her and for all the other girls out there who might be facing their own Jakes. When I was in middle school, I was trapped in a nightmare. I had a group of bullies who seemed to have made it their mission to make my life miserable. They played cruel pranks and, at times, even physically attacked me. But none of them compared to a girl named Jessica, who entered my life at the start of 7th grade. Jessica was very unkind, like the mean girls you see in movies. She was obsessed with fashion and had a group of followers who did whatever she said. She had a way of attracting attention from every guy and was constantly getting into trouble. She argued with teachers and seemed to be above the rules, and for some reason, she had decided to target me. I was a shy, plus-size kid who preferred to keep to myself. I was an easy target for someone like Jessica. She started with small things, spreading rumors, throwing trash at me, and making fun of me. As time went on, her cruelty escalated. She and her friends would corner me in the hallways, steal my food, and blame me for things I didn't do. The constant harassment made me feel like there was no escape. I tried to get help from the teachers and the principal. I reported the bullying, but the school seemed more concerned with sports and fundraising than with student safety. My complaints were dismissed. When my backpack was thrown down the stairs and my calculator broke, the school told me it was my problem. When Jessica defaced my locker with insults, they said I had no proof. When Jessica's friends blocked me outside the gym, they brushed it off as a joke. By the end of 7th grade, I was worn out and decided to make a change for 8th grade. I started taking self-defense classes and learned to stand up for myself. The old bullies began to avoid me, but Jessica's torment only intensified. It became a personal battle for me. One day, as I walked to gym class, Jessica was trailing behind me, taunting me. Overwhelmed by the stress of the day, I snapped. I turned around, shoved her back, and spat on her leg, telling her to leave me alone. She just stared frozen, and I went to gym class, not thinking much of it. After school, I went to the parking lot to catch my bus. I noticed Jessica following me, even though she usually walked to and from school. I decided to take a different route to avoid her, but she followed me. I jumped on a different bus to shake her off, but she ran after me, yelling at the driver. I managed to get to my actual bus, but Jessica was relentless. The next day, Jessica was absent, and her absence continued for the rest of the week. I felt a brief sense of relief, but it didn't last. On Friday, something felt off as I headed outside. I hesitated but shrugged it off and continued on my way. As I walked, I saw Jessica sprinting toward me, her face twisted in anger. I ran, driven by fear. I weaved through the crowd of students trying to lose her. When I reached the bus lot, I stopped to catch my breath, only to find Jessica catching up and attacking me. Jessica grabbed my hair and backpack, spinning me around violently. Despite my efforts to fight back and call for help, no one came to my aid. Just when I felt like I was about to be overpowered, my older brother appeared. He had seen Jessica before and knew what was going on. He threw his soda at Jessica, distracting her long enough for us to escape to the bus. I looked back and saw Jessica on the ground, restrained by a teacher. A hunting knife lay beside her, revealing her true intent. On Monday, I was called to the office where my brother and I met with the police and a counselor. They wanted my account of what happened. I broke down, recounting the year-long torment from Jessica, the incident at the bus lot, and the attack. My brother comforted me while the authorities listened carefully. The police and counselor were sympathetic and took detailed notes. They asked if I wanted to press charges. I was exhausted and just wanted everything to be over, so I agreed to whatever they thought was best. My brother and I decided to keep the details private. Jessica ended up in juvenile detention for the rest of the school year and part of high school. The school also made changes, implementing new anti-bullying policies and increasing security. I never saw Jessica again, and later learned she dropped out of school and got her GED, as her police record made college unattainable. It's been over 9 years since that day. While I know others have faced worse situations, the trauma from that time still lingers. The bullying led to depression, severe social anxiety, and PTSD. Sometimes I wonder if pushing harder with the school might have changed things, but I've made progress since then. I'm now in university and working with a therapist. Despite everything, I'm proud of how far I've come. It all started in my freshman year of high school. I was the new kid, shy and awkward. Making friends wasn't my strong suit, so I spent most of my time alone. The library became my sanctuary during lunch breaks. It was quiet, safe, and far from the chaos of the cafeteria. One day, everything changed. I saw some jerks picking on a girl outside the library. Something in me snapped. I marched over and shoved the biggest guy. Big mistake. I got beaten up pretty badly, but it was worth it. We all ended up in the principal's office. The bullies got suspended and I got detention. But I also got something else. A friend. Her name was Sarah. From that day on, we were inseparable. We spent every lunch together in the library, talking about books, movies, and our dreams. It was nice having someone who understood me. For once, I didn't feel so alone. As we entered junior year, things started to get weird. Sarah began acting differently. She'd give me these long looks when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Then, one day, she texted me saying we needed to talk. My stomach dropped. Those words didn't mean anything good. The next morning, Sarah confessed she had feelings for me. I was shocked. I'd never thought of her that way. She was my best friend, nothing more. I told her I needed time to think. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning, trying to figure out what to do. In the end, I decided to be honest. I texted Sarah, telling her I valued our friendship too much to risk it. Her reply was just one word: okay. It felt like a punch to the gut. The next day, Sarah didn't show up at school. I figured she was avoiding me, which hurt but made sense. But when she didn't show up the day after that or the day after that, I started to worry. Then I got a call from her mom. Sarah was missing. The police searched for weeks, then months. As time passed, hope faded. By senior year, Sarah's disappearance had become old news. I tried to move on. I made new friends, Jack and Emma. They helped me feel normal again, or as normal as I could feel with the guilt always gnawing at me. Graduation day came around. It should have been a happy occasion, but Jack didn't show up. It was odd, but I didn't think much of it until I got his text later that day. "Come to my house," it said, nothing else. I drove over, my mind racing with possibilities. Maybe he was planning a surprise party. Maybe he'd overslept and missed the ceremony. I never expected what I found. The front door was wide open. The house was silent. I called out, but no one answered. As I walked in, a smell hit me, metallic and sickening. I found Jack's dad in the living room. What I saw made me vomit. I ran out of the house and called the police. They arrived quickly, sirens blaring. They confirmed what I already knew. Jack and his mom were dead too. I couldn't process it. How could this happen? The next few months were a blur of police interviews and sleepless nights. I'd wake up in cold sweats. The image of Jack's dad burned into my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that somehow this was all connected to Sarah's disappearance. I started college that fall, desperate for a fresh start. Emma and I had gotten closer after Jack's death, and we started dating. For a while, things seemed to be looking up. I moved into my own apartment, and Emma spent a lot of time there. It almost felt like I could be happy again. Then came the text that shattered everything. It was from Jack's number, sent at 3 a.m. "Did you like my graduation gift? I thought I was your best friend. Why did you forget about me? How could you date Emma, but not me? I'm going to take her away from you, just like I did Jack." My blood ran cold. It couldn't be real. Jack was dead. The pieces started falling into place in my mind, forming a horrifying picture. Sarah. It had to be Sarah. I called Emma immediately, but she didn't answer. Panic rising, I rushed to her dorm. Her roommate said she'd left hours ago to meet me, but I hadn't asked to meet her. I raced back to my apartment, praying I was wrong. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything was eerily quiet. I called out Emma's name, my voice shaking. No response. As I moved through the apartment, I noticed things out of place. A knocked-over lamp. A smear of something dark on the wall. I found Emma in the bedroom. She was tied to a chair, unconscious, but breathing. Relief washed over me, quickly replaced by terror as I heard a noise behind me. I turned to see Sarah, her eyes wild, a knife in her hand. She looked so different from the girl I'd known in high school. Her hair was matted, her clothes dirty and torn, but it was her eyes that scared me the most. They were empty, devoid of the warmth I once knew. Sarah started talking, her words tumbling out in a frenzied rush. She told me how she'd watched me all these years, how she'd taken Jack and his family to punish me for rejecting her, how she couldn't bear to see me with Emma. I tried to reason with her, to reach the friend I once knew. But as she advanced, knife raised, I realized that girl was long gone. In that moment, I knew my life would never be the same. The nightmare that began with a simple act of kindness had come full circle, and I was trapped in its center. As Sarah lunged at me, time seemed to slow down. I had a split second to decide, fight or flight. The choice I made in that moment would determine not just my fate, but Emma's as well. And as I stared into the eyes of my former best friend, now a stranger consumed by madness, I knew that whatever happened next, the scars of this night would stay with me forever. I never thought changing schools could turn my life upside down. It all started when my family moved from the city to a small village during my last year of middle school. The new school was in a nearby town, much bigger than what I was used to. Getting there was a challenge. I hated taking the bus, so my mom had to drive me every day. Looking back, I don't think riding the bus would have changed much. The problems ran deeper than that. From day one, I felt like an outsider. The school was huge, filled with kids from all the surrounding villages. It didn't take long to realize this place was different. There weren't many foreigners, and a lot of the students seemed to have some pretty backwards views. My class was mostly guys, with only a few other girls. It didn't take long to figure out that they didn't like outsiders. And by outsiders, I mean anyone not from their part of the country. Most of the guys were openly racist, picking on anyone who didn't fit their idea of normal. Some of the guys were real pieces of work. One bragged about hacking NASA, which was obviously bull. Another killed a bat they found in the classroom, like it was something to be proud of. The only person who seemed halfway decent was a girl from Iran. I still wonder how she managed to stick it out there when I couldn't. I tried talking to the school counselor about the bullying, but when things got serious, she sided with the guys. It was like being stuck in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Desperate to make friends, I added people from school on Facebook. I didn't really know who was who, but I figured it was worth a shot. Some people were nice, others never said a word, and some were just jerks. It wasn't the greatest plan, but I was running out of options. Things got really bad after winter break. Someone added me to a group chat, and it turned into a witch hunt. I was the target. I left the chat, but they kept adding me back or messaging me privately. The stuff they said was terrifying. They talked about assaulting me, saying all the guys in school were in on it. I knew I couldn't go back. The thought of facing them made me sick. My parents had to clean out my locker and talk to my teachers. I couldn't even look out the windows for weeks, scared I'd see one of them. For years, I avoided that town like it was cursed. I'd break out in a cold sweat just thinking about going there alone. I abandoned my old Facebook account and made a new one. I was so paranoid. I had a friend log into my old accounts and delete everything. I kept the yearbook, though. It felt important to have a record of their names just in case. We never went to the police. I guess because nothing physical happened, it didn't seem like they'd do anything. Looking back, I realize how much that experience changed me. It wasn't just about switching schools or moving to a new place. It was about losing my sense of safety, my trust in others. The first few weeks after I left that school, I jumped at every sound. Every car that drove by our house made me think they'd found me. I'd wake up in the middle of the night. Sure, I'd heard someone trying to break in. My parents tried to understand, but I could see the worry in their eyes. They wanted to help, but how do you fix something like that? How do you make someone feel safe when their whole world has been turned upside down? I started at a new school eventually. It was smaller, closer to home. The kids there weren't perfect, but they weren't monsters either. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that at any moment, things could go wrong again. I became hyper-aware of how I acted, what I said. I was always watching, always on guard. Making friends was hard. I'd catch myself wondering if they were really who they said they were, or if they had some hidden agenda. The internet, which had once been a place of escape, now felt like a minefield. I'd flinch every time I got a new message request, my heart racing until I was sure it wasn't one of them. Years passed, and slowly things got better. The fear faded, but it never really went away. It just changed shape. Instead of being afraid of those specific people, I became wary of everyone. I started to see patterns in the way people acted, the loud ones, the ones who tried too hard to be liked. They reminded me of the guys from that school. I'd find myself pulling away, even when they hadn't done anything wrong. Sometimes I'd dream about that school. In my dreams, I'd be walking down those hallways again, feeling small and scared. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, relieved to find myself safe in my own bed. As I got older, I started to understand more about what had happened. It wasn't just about me being different or them being jerks. It was about power, about fear, about small minds in a small town lashing out at anything unfamiliar. I often wonder what happened to that girl from Iran. Did she make it through? Did she find a way to rise above it all? In my darker moments, I feel guilty for leaving her behind. But then I remind myself that I had to save myself first. Sometimes I think about looking up those guys online, seeing what became of them, but I always stop myself. What good would it do? They probably don't even remember me. While I've carried this weight for years, I still have that yearbook tucked away in a box in my closet. Every now and then, I take it out and look at their faces. They look so young, so ordinary. It's hard to believe they could have caused so much pain. In the end, I survived. I made it through that dark time and came out the other side. I'm not the same person I was before, but maybe that's okay. I'm stronger now, more aware of the world and its dangers. But I'm also more aware of its beauty, of the kindness that exists alongside the cruelty. For every person who tried to hurt me, there were others who helped me heal. My family, my new friends, even strangers who showed unexpected kindness. That experience will always be a part of me, a chapter in my story. But it's not the whole story. It's not the end. I'm still here, still moving forward, still learning to trust and hope and live without fear. And in the end, maybe that's the greatest victory of all.